Namaste, dear friends. This is again another episode of our longer interviews with Ananda, Europe's pioneers. Today is really special. We have 𝗙𝗃 Devi, 𝗙𝗃 Jyotish here, they need very little introduction. They are, of course, the directors now, the spiritual directors of Ananda worldwide, which means that they travel a lot. They visit us here at anandaassisi every year. They go to India, they travel in America, and they stay in touch with all of us, also through their weekly blogs that they publish, and that then every 2 or 3 years are published also in book form. Jyotish was nominated, let's say, as Swami Kriyananda's successor. And so ever since Swami left the body, he and Devi together have been friends, inspiration to countless devotees of this big Ananda Sangha family. So thank you for being here with us. And I'd like to go back a little bit in time.
Okay.
We are history now, Ananda. We can already talk about history. I don't know if you liked the timelines when you had to study history at work. I first met you in 1985, but then at that time you had already been here for a year, and it was in Como, Italy. And I'd like to ask you, Devi, if you can share some memories of how that came about. So you were sent here, you spent a year here in northern Italy, in Como, in 𝗙𝗃𝗀𝗺𝗺𝗺. Do you have any special memories that you could share about that? And also Jyotish.
Yes, that was just a marvelous time. You know, Swamiji had developed very deep spiritual connections while he was in SRF. He would come to Italy and he made some very, very deep spiritual friendships, one especially with a woman who was the SRF center leader in Rome, Renata Arlini. She was a remarkable woman, a contessa and every bit of it. And yeah, very commanding. But she was a loyal friend to Swamiji, and he would, while with SRF, he would do satsangs in her home. He gave Kriya in her very nice apartment in Rome. And then when he was SRF severed the connections, Renata continued to invite him. And SRF didn't like that. And they said, you have to choose. If you want to be a center leader, you don't continue that connection. And she just said, I am not that kind of a friend. And so she gave up that, but she continued to invite Swami. There was another woman Renata passed away about maybe 10 years ago. And there was another woman, 𝗙𝗃𝗀𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺, who is still with us. And she was from Milan and knew Swamiji. And they kept inviting him to come back. And then my memory is this is how it happened. Alessandra said to Swamiji, you know, my family has this summer villa near Lake Como in a small town, 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏. And if you and your students, the members of Ananda, would like to come for the summer and give programs and classes, you could use. It's a very nice building. It has a big room where guests can come, big, beautiful gardens. And there's a separate little house where you could live, Swamiji. So he said, yes, he would. And then he invited a small handful of us to come as well.
And you were part of it.
We were part of that, yes.
Swami had met a group from Sorrento, and it was centered in a Catholic church. A group had gathered. It was a charismatic Catholic group.
In Sorrento.
In Sorrento. They had become a community, and Swamiji was very interested at the time in finding a way to bring meditation into the churches. And this seemed like it would be a bridge. And so we came over, I believe it was in October of 1984. And we were with that group staying in Sorrento for 4, 5, 6 weeks, something like that. We had our son with us, who was 8 at the time. and we stayed there. And then after a while, it became clear that things were not going to work out, that the connection wasn't strong enough.
Swami was hoping to find a middle ground between charismatic Christianity and our path.
Right.
But they had a hidden agenda. They were trying to convert him to their way.
Right.
And he became very ill. It was a very difficult time. And we were there, and finally we just said, Swamiji, we must leave now.
Right, right.
And we did.
And so we left, and then at that time, because it had been used the previous summer,
That's right.
𝗙𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃 offered us the use of her villa up above Como in a little village called 𝗲𝘀𝘀𝗃. And so she offered the use of that, but it was really a summer villa. It wasn't meant for winter, and it happened to be the coldest winter in 100 years in Europe. And so it was a difficult winter, but there was a small group, about 6 of us, among whom were Ram and Diana, Devi and me, and then a woman named Patricia London, a woman named Judy Fox, Mark Monson, who's still with us. I believe he lives in Vienna.
Vienna.
And maybe a couple of other people, but we stayed there in the winter and got the work going. And then
But there were many adventures along the way. In that winter, there was no heating in the house. And so we just would wear all the clothes we had all the time. Yeah. And
Your son was back in America at that time.
our son went back because school was starting then, and he came back to Ananda village and stayed with friends and went to school. So that was okay. But it was.
Was it also okay for the mother?
It was very different.
Yeah. For me, no. It was very difficult.
We're talking here to all the mothers.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it was very difficult. Very, very. And then the family he was staying with would call us, and he would get on the phone, and he would be so happy. He would say, "Mommy, I caught a snake today," out in the woods, and we would be crying. And, That's wonderful. That's wonderful. But it was what needed to happen. Yeah. And in fact, we asked our son recently, he's grown now, has his own children. We said, was that hard for you that we were gone so much? And he said, no, I just lived as much in my friend's house as I did in our house. And he said, I was happy. I was still,
It was more difficult for you, maybe.
Exactly, it was. It was. So we were there over that winter, and then in the spring, I think April or so, Swami had been with us for a brief period of time, and then he went back. Then he returned in the spring, and that's when we met you at the time of his birthday.
And you had just gone through this extremely cold winter.
Extremely cold winter, many adventures.
We went to Berlin at that time, which was still
Right.
It was a divided city still, and there was a young woman who visited, who had a yoga center in West Berlin, and it was quite an experience driving through East Germany and then coming to Berlin. We'd never experienced anything like that in our lives.
But probably more significant for the future of the work. During that time, it was cold, it was late fall, early winter, and we had felt kind of pushed out of Sorrento. We were kind of just clinging to the mountainside, to the hillside there in 𝗲𝘀𝘀𝗃 up above Como. The house was chilly. The group didn't quite trust that we would pay the bills. So if there was a weekend program, they would come out, turn on the heating electricity for that weekend, and then turn it off when they left because they were concerned we wouldn't pay. So it was just not welcoming. And so we were wondering at that time whether Ananda should be in Italy. And during that time, we decided just for a trip to visit Assisi because we had heard so much about it. I had actually visited very briefly in 1974, so 10 years earlier, when I was with Swamiji during a worldwide trip. So we went to Assisi, and coming to Assisi, it just felt like we knew the city, that St. Francis was welcoming us. We stayed in a little pensione, and the woman was very welcoming, and it was as if at that time Italy and the spirituality of Italy embraced us. And so then we went back up to 𝗙𝗺𝗺, and we began to make plans to move the work from there to Assisi.
But we had left by that time.
Well, we had left by the time it moved, but we were
You were in
beginning
touch
to,
with the pioneers here.
right. And then also during that time, toward the spring, I had the idea of that we enjoyed being in Assisi so much. I thought other Americans would too. Why don't we do a pilgrimage? And as with so many of my ideas, they seemed a little far-fetched because nobody had ever tried this thing. And Devi and Dhyana and Ram was kind of neutral. Devi and Dhyana said, that's crazy. We can't do that. But we ended up doing it. And about a dozen people came. And so we went to Assisi primarily, but also, you know,
Florence, Rome.
Yeah, a little tour like that.
But it was so funny because we didn't know what we were doing. We worked with a tour agency in Milan, but they didn't really understand what we wanted either. And anyway, many mishaps. It was hilarious. There was one incident. We were in Florence, and we said, for all the meals throughout the trip, we want to spend this much.
Had a budget, a meal budget.
But we said in Florence, we'll have one really nice meal. So we go to the reservation was for this really nice restaurant. And we walked in, and first they served a little soup. And we thought, okay, well, that's nice. And then they served some little bruschetta. And we see these beautiful platters going by. And then they served a poached pear. And that was it. They knew we wanted to go to a nice restaurant, but the food budget was the same.
Right.
So that's what we had. So everyone looked at that, and then they just said, I want that. And so everybody ordered their own meal. But many hilarious things happened on that trip. But it was the first time anyone from Ananda went to 𝗙𝗺𝗺, and that was remarkable. We had heard about it, and the bus driver was a friend of ours, a young woman whose father drove a bus. So we rented a van. She said, oh, I can drive the bus, but she didn't have professional training. But we kind of knew where 𝗙𝗺𝗺 was, and we were driving. Then it started snowing, and it was snowing harder and harder and harder. Finally, we reached the gates. It was all closed, all dark. No one went there in those days, and we were pounding on the door. Nothing. The gate. Finally, we heard someone coming, and there was this old monk, barefoot in the snow, and he said, "Kyoto, no." And we said, "We've come all the way from America," and he looked at us and he went, one
moment, un momento.
Closed the door, and a long time went by. Finally, he came back, and he had this big smile on his face. He had a big key. He let us
medieval key.
Yeah, and he took us to all the places, and this was interesting.
The door opened.
And he took us into the chapel where they had a big organ, pipe organ. He said it was like he was sharing his toys. He said, "Do you want to play?" And we said, oh, no, no, no. And then Jyotish, okay. So he, in this little Franciscan monastery, in this huge pipe organ, he played Door of My Heart. And it was a pretty amazing. So that was the first time, the first Ananda pilgrimage, the first time anybody from Ananda had gone to 𝗷𝗺𝗺. So it was kind of groundbreaking.
Oh, very nice.
So the whole opening up of the work in Europe sounds like there were some tests in the beginning, like with 𝗙𝗀𝗃, and then a year, adventurous year in the cold.
Yeah, it was. And then, in fact, when Swami came...
And how did Swami relate to that when you called him?
He wasn't there.
No, but he was very solicitous. He was very supportive. He had other things he had to do, so he had to be in America. But when he came back in the spring, my memory is it was late April or so, he said, no great work is started without someone's tapasya. And you all have done the tapasya. And so it was that exactly. Those tests came. We endured them, did the best we could with those tests. And once that tapasya was finished, then it began to open up. Then after Swamiji's birthday, I don't know, not immediately, but a short time after, Devi and I went back to America because we had a son after all.
And Swami flew back. Kirtani came, and I think Parvati came as well. Yeah. Parvati and
right.
And so they were good people.
Right.
And Ram and Dhyana stayed, and it's very hard to say goodbye to them because we'd been through so much. But anyway, it was
a very interesting start. And then they, of course, began exploring how we could move the work to
Probably the language was very important for those early Americans to learn Italian.
Yes, and it was difficult. You know, we sort of got by a little bit when it was face-to-face, but the most frightening thing was for the telephone to ring, because as soon as you said pronto, then exactly.
And we made so many hilarious mistakes. We were trying to teach energization. We were trying to say ankle rotation, cavaglia, and we would say cavalli, rotate your horses,
your ponies.
So and we would try to say the prayer in Italian, and then they would be a long pause, and they would say it back. They would translate our Italian into real Italian. So, but somehow
Devi had been helping a neighbor's son learn a little English, and so they wanted to honor her or us, so they invited us up, and Devi was trying to say to the young boy that we don't eat meat, only she didn't quite get it right, and she said, non mangiamo cane.
Cane, dog.
Cane, and his eyes got big, and he went and hid behind his mother, and that was the last opening for him.
Well, it's in a way very fascinating to hear all this, because thanks to those first years or year and months, we're here now in anandaassisi. So if we go fast forward, now you have a big community here, anandaassisi. What is your relationship to this community? How would you describe it? We have Ananda Village, we have anandaassisi, we have Ananda Portland. There are quite a few Ananda communities. How does this one stand out? What do you think are the particular characteristics?
Well, first of all, if Devi and I have a home, probably the one that we're most used to is Ananda Village. We've lived there ever since it started. But second to that is Assisi, because even before Swami was living here, he and others, we often visited here. And then once he moved here, then we came yearly to spend some time with him. So ever since he came here, I think it was 1996, maybe 97, we would make a yearly trip, and we would come here. And then once he went to India, then we would go to India. But we'd still often come here, even when he was residing now, mainly in India, because even though he was there, he maintained his house here.
But the people who live here, like myself, I go to the village, and this is the most beautiful place on earth. And vice versa, Americans who come here say, oh, it just renews you. You don't want to go.
Yes.
Absolutely. There's something to be
Complementary.
Right.
Yeah, complementary.
Right.
And I mean, we feel it. We were just talking last night with Ananda and 𝗙𝗀𝗃𝗃. We had that beautiful 𝗙𝗃𝗀𝗃 ceremony, and the depth of devotion and inner renunciation, and it doesn't exist in America in the same way. And so there's something to be learned, and that's, you know, it's why
Especially devotion.
Especially devotion.
devotion and inner renunciation too. It's a subtle difference, but we have people at Ananda village. They live simply. They serve. They're selfless, but it's more. The tradition of monasticism is stronger in Italy than in America. And so in America, monasteries barely exist, and are not considered.
Not part of tradition.
Exactly.
Right.
Whereas here, they're so much a part of tradition, and people understand.
And honor.
And honor. Yeah. And so there's just so many things, the graciousness, the warmth, the it's always to be honest, it's a little bit of an adaptation for Jyotish and me, because in America things are very organized, and here they're not. And at first it's a bit of a shock, and then it all works out, and so it's just, I think it's very, very important. And now India, of course, is coming up, and that is a whole other additive, where India is the heart of understanding that this world is not real, the unreality of the material world, and that the search for final liberation. So it's like each one, it's a beautiful
blend.
Yeah, really blessed.
Yeah.
And each of those three main centers,
So
village or America, I would say America, Italy, or Europe, primarily Italy, but Europe is expanding, and India. Each has almost a certain speciality that it helps the other with. America, I don't think the work could have started either in Italy or in India, because Americans are very facile at starting things and making changes and figuring out how to organize things and getting things done.
And working together.
Yeah, all of those. And so that's why Master came to America. And also America is the first country that didn't have a history basically before 𝗙્વાપara Yuga. So it's a 𝗙્વાપara Yuga country. And so that freshness allows a certain mindset, a certain can-do attitude that was necessary at the beginning, but it also doesn't have, one might say, the emotional maturity or the spiritual maturity of Europe, but especially of India. And so each of the three major epicenters of Ananda's work, America, Italy, and Europe, and India, have a special quality that they bring to it. And honestly, the worldwide citizen of Ananda is a blending of all three of these.
Mm-hmm. And another beautiful thing in all three places is there is the founding pioneer generation, And then there's the kind of middle generation that, that said, this is a good thing. I want to add my life to this. And then there's the new people that come.
Right.
And so, again, this was Swami's genius. He didn't form Ananda as an organization. He formed it as a network of divine friendship.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when we come, part of the reason it's so joyful for us, and it really is, we love our time here, is to connect with all three of those levels. You know, the people that we've known for 40 years, the people that we've known for 30 years, and then the people that we've known for a few years, or maybe we just met. And it's, I think it's a little hard for newcomers to realize that that not just us, but all of us are sincere in our, you're our friend, you just came. And,
Right.
And you don't find that anywhere else in the world.
No, it's quite unique.
And so and that's why it's important to have pilgrimages from each of the different places to keep those personal connections strong.
Alive.
And in India too, we see, we would go visit every year. He just passed away last year, but Induban, who was Swami's, and Induban and Kishan, they were two young men, I don't know, 20 years old. And when Swami was in India in
the 60s.
Yeah, they were his right-hand men. And we would spend time with them every year. And then Indu just passed away this year, but Kishan's still there. And so it's like you keep those deep soul connections.
And I think on a very subtle level, we're all helping each other also in that way.
Fact.
Yeah.
In fact.
Because that would be an interesting question. So Swami sort of gave us we should all become Jivan Muktas in this life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to be first? Ananda village, will they produce the first Jivan Muktas, or Anandaassisi, Ananda India?
You know that.
Of course, I'm joking. But
no, I know, but do you know the dream about that? The woman had a dream, a woman who lived at Ananda village. And she told Swami this dream, and he said that was a true vision. And in the dream, it was on a hillside, not in a specified place. And Swami was dressed, interesting, like kind of in an ancient robe. And he had the breastplate of like a Hebrew priest. And people were holding hands.
But on the breastplate were jewels, different jewels. And in fact, it was the Navratna. It was the equivalent
of all the planets, one jewel for each planet. Okay.
And so there were small circles of people all over this hill, and they were holding hands chanting. And then every once in a while, someone would raise their hands in the circle, and everyone knew they were liberated. But it wasn't any sense of, why them and not me? It was everyone knew their time would come. And she said it was so joyful, and she told Swami, and he said,
And where did she live, this lady?
At the village.
At the village.
Yeah.
And where was the setting? Could be anywhere. Ananda Loka.
Yeah, Ananda Loka, exactly.
But essentially, to return to your question, the moment when a soul becomes a Jivan Mukta is so personal. I mean, they have lived in all of these countries many, many times. Maybe not in America, but certainly they've lived in Europe many times. I know that I have. Swami has, Master has, in India many times, and in America probably several times. But it's the deep dedication that is really not dependent on time or place. It's that deep desire, a wordless yearning for liberation. And at the time when the karmic tendencies are, one might say, dissolved enough, then that liberation will take place. But I don't think where you're living at the time has very much to do with it. Mm-hmm. So it could be anywhere.
And as Master said, who's the closest to the Guru? could be a name on the mailing list.
Right.
I love that
That's
because it's somebody we don't even know.
Right.
which is something that I wanted to also talk about with you, or wanted to ask you something. So we have Ananda Sangha, basically, that at a certain point, I think Swami himself called it Ananda Sangha, which is not only the communities, but people who feel a belonging or a part of this big worldwide family, right? So, and I think that the number of people who are part of the Sangha are many, many more than the people who live in communities. If you add them, yeah. So is there anything, so I live in, I don't know, Paris, I'm married, I'm young, I have children, and I discover I feel part of this big family, but there's no way that I can come and live at Ananda village or anandaassisi. How would you talk to these friends?
Right. You know, in a certain sense, it's gotten easier because of the internet. It used to be that if a person was interested, we could have books, they could read the books, and as Swami wrote more, and gradually as others, and of course the literature from Master, there were really a lifetime of reading that a person could do, but a person only gets so much in that way. It's just one might say, gate into the mind. And so we would stay in touch with the person, we would correspond. We had various different kinds of newsletters, things of that nature. All of that worked pretty well. But then when the internet came and the potential for not only classes that were both live and very complete, that opened up not just a gate, but a huge pipeline of not only information, but support.
Presence.
Yeah. And then also there's the virtual community, which has about 350 members. So
That's just in
all around the world.
Yeah. And that's based out of Ananda village, but there's also a comparable one in India.
Right.
Yeah, and the Germans are starting, but I'll tell you about that later on.
Good. So those virtual communities help support. And of course, we have many, we probably have now 100 meditation groups at least. And I would say we might have 20 centers. Difference between a meditation group is it's usually in a person's home and people gather there. A center has grown, mature enough so that they realize that sometimes people aren't always comfortable coming to a person's home. So they rent a space, and then they have classes, more classes, and more opportunities to come. Very often, usually Sunday service, Sunday satsang. So meditation groups, centers, and of course the various live-in residential communities. Assisi being essentially the only one in Europe, but the time is going to come probably shortly when there will be more.
We'll see.
Yeah,
in Russia.
And
Russia.
Right.
Already started.
You know, also with the online teaching from both India and America, I'm not sure how much it.
We're starting, Devi.
Okay, good.
Wait.
But it's more than just teaching. I watch. It's really a beautiful service of the heart, and people are, one of the monks who lives at Ananda village, Sagar, he's Indian, but he got him residency at the village. All the time, people, they'll take a course, but that's just the beginning. It's the ongoing support, friendship. And he just sent us a picture. Some man from somewhere on the East Coast, I think it was Connecticut, came to the village, and he came to stay. The monks, there's a small group of monks that live together. He came to their house and he made them this beautiful dinner, beautiful dessert, and Sagar sent us pictures. So, that's not just a student.
Yeah.
That's a sense of family. And we just see it over and again. Like, it's a little bit strange, when people who have been online students, and Jyotish and I don't teach too much online.
With some courses, yeah, we travel more. We do a lot of satsangs.
But like people will meet us and they'll say, "Oh, I know you," and we just have to say, "Yes, yes, we know you."
Right.
And but the connectedness is really remarkable, and people go through life challenges, and Ananda's there to support them. So it's far beyond teaching. It's really
beautiful. Yeah. I remember two things. I remember you I think it was shortly after Swami's demise, saying that you had this idea, like the outreach on the internet. It was very strong.
Right.
And then we had a meeting with you here, and every year you came and you said, "When are you starting the internet here?" And the only thing that changed at all was the pandemic. So that was a blessing in disguise. Right. It's hard to say it's a blessing because, of course, there are many people who it also brought suffering. But in 3 days or something, we had an elderly lady who was learning how to use the camera. Right. And so I would come in the morning for the online meditation. You sit here, no, like this, and then right. So that was a big miracle. Yeah.
In fact, yeah, you did more than 3 days than you had the previous 3 years.
Exactly. It went like very fast, and now anandaassisi, we're up to date, let's say. But it had to come after America and India.
Yeah.
Somehow I think India is also very. I'm talking too much. You should be.
No, but
we're just talking.
No, it's true. We're just chatting. I mean, we're three friends. We've known each other for 40 years after all.
But India is very technically savvy.
Yeah, they're subtle.
They skipped the whole landline phone scene. Nobody had.
Right.
They just went right to cellular, and in so many ways.
There was a funny story near our a rural community near Pune. It's by a little village in farming country. Davy and I were taking a walk, and we saw this man plowing his field with an oxen and a wooden plow. He was standing on the plow, and that he would drive the oxen up one row.
Just had a little
dhoti. And Davy said, we could have seen exactly the same scene 1,000 years ago. And so we just stopped and watched for a few minutes.
He was a distance away.
Yeah, a little distance away. And he got to the end of a row, and he kind of wiped his brow, and we thought he was going to put his, rag in his dhoti, and he pulls out a cell phone and starts talking.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So India skipped over a lot of. They're very technically desirous of moving into the future.
Yeah. We just saw a fascinating article someone sent us, Indian friend, about the team that got the moon rocket from India, mostly women, and but just so joyful, and it's just their minds work that way more than
very subtle. There's a lot Indian community also in the United States, and many of them work in the informatic technology sector. Yeah. So one more question about working together. That is also very challenging. People coming together, you just said the Americans had it more in their spiritual DNA or in their history. So sometimes I see people who have meditation groups or they have centers, and they find it pretty challenging to get along with each other. Mm-hmm. And then they say, and then when one of us comes, things go better, and then we leave, and then it becomes difficult again. So, and of course there is help. Like everything you've said before about we are there also through the internet, and we do online satsangs. But how can you make that leap? When I'm local and I have a meditation group and we're trying our best, but we have challenges. So how can you make that leap from going beyond that sphere where there might be more, I wouldn't call it antagonism, but just harder?
Yeah, there's no simple answer to that. Swami always said that any group depends on its leader.
Yeah.
And so
I found it very hard because there are not many leaders in the world.
Yeah. So if you take any group, a big group or a little group, things go well if people generally want to follow the direction of the leader. And that allows everyone to move their energies together in a unified way. But if nobody is capable of being a leader, or if there's somebody that the others won't accept as a leader, then there's the egos vie a little, not in a selfish way necessarily, but they say my ideas are just as good as their ideas. Why should I listen to them?
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to get together. Ananda could not have started without Swami.
I know, but there's also something else, however, I see, and also in my community, our community here, there's much more teams. So I'm part of a Sangha team, and I don't feel that I'm the leader. I think much more Ruby is my boss, because she knows so much more. She's 20 or I don't know how much younger. I don't want to know, but I mean, we're just working together, and it goes much more with teams than with, I don't see in every team a leader. Or it comes very natural, just people that you trust someone, or...
But you know, one of the things we're starting to realize in America, because these same questions come up, the team isn't working well together, that there's tension, and some of the groups dissolve because of it. And we're starting to talk about our group leaders, we need to train them more.
Right.
It's one thing to be a devotee, to know how to meditate, have kriya, but it's a whole other thing to lead a group. And so we're really talking about having week-long retreats at Expanding Light here
for leaders.
For leaders.
For leaders.
What do you need to do? How do you work with group dynamics? How do you work with difficult people? Because you need some training in it. It isn't, you can be a beautiful devotee, but there's one grumpy person in your group and it destroys the whole.
Yeah, you don't know how to deal with it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So we're starting to see if we really want the groups to feel supported, it's one thing for all, you go here, and in America, different leaders go to visit the groups, but they need to feel they have tools to lead the group themselves. So I think it's really important we define, how do you do publicity? How do you work with group dynamics? How do you create, without being hierarchical, a sense of leadership, teamwork? But somebody has to be in charge.
Swami, of course, wrote Supportive Leadership, which is a good manual, but people need training in order to do that. But there's to a certain extent, a natural evolution. In the beginning, generally speaking, there needs to be a strong enough leader so that people accept, and that sets a direction. After people have traveled a ways along that direction, a sense of trust builds up among each other, and then teamwork is possible because everybody trusts. You trust Ruby to make the right decision. But if you hadn't any experience with her, so it takes a cohesion that holds together directionally for a while, and then it can spread without nearly so much kind of a sense of hierarchy. And our leadership is not largely hierarchical in any case. But it's more built on friendship. But just to finish that, even that friendship, a group needs to accept, well, let's start by listening to this person because they're able to tune in to Master or Swami because of their experience. Exactly.
But it is also important for you to visit the groups
Absolutely.
If for no other reason, like I'll give you there was a very similar situation that just happened in India. I won't name the city, but a center that was just starting, and a very fine woman was leading it, who had been with Ananda for many years, and we really trusted her. So she was starting this group, and it was a rather it was a distance away from our other large centers. But a woman joined the group, another woman who was, we met them, who was
competitive, strong-willed.
wealthy woman, very aristocratic, very, and the other woman who was the leader was a very quiet woman and not demonstrative. And it was really creating a lot of problems. The leader wanted to close. Diana went and stayed with them, really talked it through with them. And then they had some group meetings. They didn't talk about it directly, but just through Diana's, I don't know, how she behaved, it was clear that she was giving authority to the leader. And then when this other woman said, well, what about, and Diana said at the meeting, she was quite strong, I would rather do it this way. And Diana kept saying, well, this is so-and-so's decision. This is so-and-so. And the woman finally, she didn't leave. She comes occasionally, but she's not trying to take over the group. So in that way, it's important.
That's a good example.
Yeah, and she was much, much less in tune than a quiet person.
Yeah.
I think then it also works naturally because people trust the one who's more in tune.
Right.
Ego, if there's too much ego, it doesn't really give much trust. So last question about the future of Ananda, especially in Europe. So I just wanted to say Jyotish and Devi are exceptionally, usually after their stay here in summer, they fly from Europe to India to spend from Rome, another 3 months or 3 months in India. This time we're first going to the Netherlands, and there will be a retreat there with devotees from Ananda UK, Ananda Francophone, France, Switzerland, Belgium, and then Germany and the Netherlands. So I hope this will give you also more information, of course, about how people are dedicating themselves there. But any deeper thoughts that you could share about the future of Anandaassisi, but also of Ananda Europe in general? Just whatever comes to you.
Yeah, there's no simple one way, nor is there a simple answer. I know early on, I used to put pins on a map and say, well, this city will go there and will develop, and that city will develop. But it's much more organic than that.
So you did outreach for a period.
We did outreach, and
that first year.
Yeah. But unless there is a group there, kind of like a raindrop, there needs to be something for the mist to come around, and then a raindrop can form. So unless there's something there, it won't coalesce.
You have all these beautiful metaphors also when you speak. Maybe you was a poet in a previous life.
I think I also think in terms of images. Yeah. So in any case, all over Europe, more and more groups are coalescing. And once a group coalesces, people will get a lot from that group. But among that group, there will be a certain number of people, the percentage, that say, this is really wonderful. I want more of this in my life. Just coming once or twice a week is not enough. And they will spontaneously want to have community. So I think community comes not by a hierarchical planning, we're going to start one, but by a calling out of the people, you've got to help us start a community. We hope that that's what will happen. Yeah, but I think that process will just continue. Then you've got economic factors. So if the alternative life, if it's everything's good, jobs are easy, money is fine, schools are good, all of that, there isn't the impetus to change. But if you start getting sick and you get worse and worse, then you'll make some lifestyle changes. A society that gets worse and worse will recognize it's got to make some lifestyle changes. And the first ones will be people that want to do this. So there's the individual yearning for more. There's the, I don't know, societal pressure. And I think the combination of those two are going to push more and more little communities, because Master said that this is going to be right.
But the third factor too is just the divine plan.
Right.
And that's something greater than all of us. So, as we watch Ananda Village develop now for more than 50 years, there were so many things that happened that was not a conscious choice, but you look back and you think, oh, that was wonderful that happened. And now this is, and there does seem to be a divine order, divine plan.
And that also includes like new people coming to the village to live there.
Exactly. And just when you needed a person to do that, they come, and happens so many times. But I think one thing I would say, we were having some months ago, I believe, maybe a year ago, we were having a satsang with a group in Russia, the devotees there. And they were saying, when are you going to send people to Russia to start communities? And we said, no, that's not how it works. You should send people to Assisi to live there and get trained. Because that's like Swami had Narya and Laura and their family, two of the strong members here, 𝗙𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃 and 𝗏𝗏𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴. When the work had been here a few years, he said, come and live at the village for a few years and then absorb that vibration, how we do things. So I think it's important. I can see how people would feel overwhelmed at the thought of starting a community, but and then people ask us too, when are you going to, because Swami did send people to Palo Alto, to Seattle, to Sacramento, to Portland, and but they had been people living for a long time at the village. And so I think that's the training comes in living in community. And then from there, I don't know, you're just in tune with a vision that you never had before. Like when we all came to the village, we were just college students by and large, or we had just finished college. That's all I knew. I knew nothing about anything else, just academics. And then we were doing things I never imagined, and it seemed totally natural, self-evident. And that because there's a bigger plan. And so we just have to not be afraid to try new things, like online classes or whatever it might be. And just to have faith that you take the step, even though it feels like you're stepping into, thin air, and then the ground is there underneath your foot. And it's, but I really feel that the momentum of these communities will begin having a tremendous impact in the world, because people come here for a weekend and they're changed, and little by little people will say, my life out there is not worth anything. So I mean, how many years did Jyotish and I have in our bodies? Maybe 10, maybe a little more. 20, okay, maybe 20, maybe 15, 20, but not that many, less than we've already lived. And, but.
And how many of those will be really active and dynamic?
Yeah.
Almost, you look at the history of Ananda, and very few people have lived to be 90. And those who have, they are not necessarily active and or dynamic. And so I'm 80, so I can't assume that I've got more than 10 years. I'm in good health. I'm, my brain still functions, and
more or less.
And so everything's working, but you can't assume. So the Jaya said, he said this 5 years ago, my main job is training my replacement. And that's more what Devi and I have been working with. is working with the younger people, and
Not just
especially
one, but
the
a whole
younger leader,
generation.
but worldwide.
I can see that because you have also asked Ruby to come to the retreat, and Arudra and Mahia.
Right.
So
You know,
my wife is also the younger generation.
Yes.
yeah. It's all, but it gives you, like Swami Master would say, the blueprint is in the ether. And I think that's just become very evident.
Yeah.
And the way Ananda Village as a prototype, that's all it really is developing. It's just like, wow, that's so beautiful. And none of us knew, it just step by step.
Well, thank you so much. I think conversations like these are just like little seeds that spread, and people will watch it. Many, many, many people will watch it everywhere. And I think they will gain very precious.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Thank you. It's wonderful to do.
If there's ideas with all the pioneers in Europe, if they're not captured, it's lost.
Yeah, all that experience.
And this remains. I mean, it's.
Do you have any closing thing to say?
I would also say we have a team here, of course.
Right,
We have
of
Anthony, we have Louisa, and we have Francesca. Yeah. It's all cooperation.
Yes. One time Swami was leaving India, and Dhyana said, "How can we function here while you're gone?" And he said something very precious. He said, "Remember, Dhyana, this is not my work, and it's not your work. This is the work of Babaji and Master. And if they want it to succeed, it will succeed. And if they don't, nothing we can do will make it so." So our primary job is to tune in to them and to be, to the very best of our abilities, the channel for what they want to have happen.
And you've gone through many tests here in Assisi in Europe, and the tests that the village went through were huge. And I remember, not to belabor the point, but we had 10 years of legal challenges, and after it was all over and we came out very, very well, we had a kind of a gratitude satsang for the wonderful lawyers that represented us. And one lawyer, John Parsons, was weeping. Actually, 3 out of the 4 lawyers were crying. And he just said there were so many moments where I thought it was over, and that Ananda would just be folded up and rolled over. And yet you just always had the courage and the positive attitude that you just kept going. And he said, and here we are today. So, and where does that come from? It's the grace of God.
Yeah.
So the tests are proof to us that there is a divine grace sustaining it.
Well, thank you. Thank you both once more. And thank you for
Thank you for the team that has done this.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.